Hey everyone, welcome to Social. I do this show every single week where I talk to various smart friends about social media. And this is Instagram month. Every show is focusing on different topics relating to Instagram. So I'm very excited today to have Lauren Kendrick, who works for Plann, which is a software that allows you to strategize, plan, schedule your content, and also analyze those analytics. Welcome, Lauren. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for being on, and I would love anyone who's watching us live to also pop in and say hi, let us know where you're watching from, and ask any questions at any point throughout the broadcast. So today, Lauren and I are going to be talking about the importance of actually planning and strategizing your Instagram content, because Instagram, it's a place where a lot of people, it's more personal, and so people kind of just, post stuff, and it's not a bad thing, but the fact is it can be to your advantage to be a little bit more strategic. So we're going to get into how you can do that. And no, the answer isn't only by using Plann. We're going to be doing some general
Absolutely.
strategy too. All
Yeah.
right, so first off, Lauren, let's talk about why Instagram. We both use and love Instagram. Plann, while it does work with other platforms, is primarily an Instagram based tool. So let's talk about what's great about Instagram. What do you love about it?
Yeah, well, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I think it's because it's such a personal platform and it feels a little more accessible, I think, or a little more maybe casual in some ways than other platforms. Facebook has really made a shift to being a little more targeted toward advertising, obviously, but also toward long form media or informational type content. And Instagram really has this unique blend, I think, of personal content with informational content with entertainment, and also you can buy things on Instagram. So there's this really interesting blend of content that feels very relatable and feels very much it's just personal. It feels a little more down to earth, I think. And there's also such an opportunity to be creative on Instagram between, posts and stories and IGTV. And they're coming out, now with guides and things like that. There's so many opportunities to be creative and really express yourself, and also, interact with your community and your audience in a couple of different ways. So I think like the diversity as well.
I love that. And I love that you mentioned the guides too, because a lot of
Yeah.
people don't realize Instagram wants you to succeed on Instagram. So they're really trying to build up the concept of a creator community.
Yeah.
And they do have guides that you can download on the website, which is ironic because so much happens on the app. But on the website, they do have guides for how to really make your Instagram great. How do you make Instagram great? What do you think are some good things that tend to work really well on Instagram?
Yeah, I mean, I think that at the end of the day, if you are using it for your business or your personal brand, knowing who your audience is and knowing the story you want to tell is really important. So not just showing up on Instagram and, just kind of throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks, but really thinking about who your audience is, what types of content would interest them or excite them, when they're online, thinking about how they would interact with your content or your business in a normal circumstance, and then kind of translating that. But also, I think what works really well is being intentional, showing up regularly, and that doesn't have to mean every day, but showing up, engaging with your audience, being creative, trying stuff, measuring what works, and then really honing in on what that strategy looks like based off of, what's performing well and what your audience relates to.
And a lot of people don't even know how to find out that information. They're not sure how to figure out what their audience is going to want to see,
Yeah.
what their audience is engaging with, what's really working for them. And that's where analytics become very important. Some people don't even realize you can get analytics on Instagram. I mean, there used to be just an Instagram was an Instagram was an Instagram. And
Right.
then maybe about 2 years ago, I think, they introduced the ability to become a business account and then later a creator account.
Yep.
So let's talk about analytics, because I think that was a huge shift in the usefulness of Instagram for businesses and creators. What kind of information should we be looking at our analytics for to inform our content strategy?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because you talked about this earlier. Instagram really wants to set their people up for success. It's not about trying to hide your content or, make it difficult to be found. Like, they really want to give you information to do the best job you can on social. So, I think for a while there was sort of maybe a stigma or a negative association with a business account or a creator account. But Instagram is really making a push and really providing some awesome tools to help you be successful if you have one of those types of accounts.
I also have to note, sorry, I just want to interject there and mention that unlike Facebook, where a lot of people have realized that business pages get less reach than a personal profile, there is no such issue on Instagram. Business profiles and creator profiles get the same type of reach and engagement as personal profiles. There's no penalty there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's so important for people to realize, because I think there's a fear about, well, if I were, I really want analytics, but I've had a personal account for so long, and if I change it, am I going to have to start over? And that's just not the case. They really want businesses and creators and personal accounts, but especially those professional accounts, to be successful. So, going back to the analytics side of things, they have introduced some awesome tools that are in your settings on Instagram that you can actually go and look about, what type of engagement you're getting, what your follower growth is looking like when your people are online versus when they engage with your content. And we can talk more about how those are different, but you can really drill down to specifics around how your audience is engaging, who they are, demographic information, so that you can really build a strategy around that. So some of my favorite things to look at are when my audience is online. So when you think about, when to post, because if you Google, what's the perfect time to post, everybody has an opinion, right? But it really is specific to you and your audience. So for Plann, for example, we have a global audience. So those numbers and those times can be, all over the shop. But if you are, let's say, a product-based business that's geared toward new moms, for example, you have a window of opportunity for that audience around their normal day-to-day activities. So, for example, if you're thinking about a new mom, okay, she's probably going to be up late feeding. She's going to be potentially up early, doing breakfast and the morning routine. She's going to wind down at the end of the day and want to get on Instagram. So you start to think about the mentality of your audience. And you'll see that reflected in those analytics, because you'll see that they're online during those kind of windows. But they might be engaging with your content at a different time. So a lot of times we get the question, well, should I post when I get the most engagement, or should I post when my people are online? And I really think it's finding a balance, because as you post more, that when the engagement metrics will change. But when people are online, stays pretty consistent for the most part. Now, granted, recently things have shifted a good bit because people's lives have changed.
Yeah, we're all home.
Yeah, absolutely. So people are, staying up later, getting online in the middle of the day when they might not normally.
Maybe when they were on an office VPN, they couldn't necessly go on Instagram as much, and now, it's a free-for-all.
Exactly. So that has definitely shifted. But I think, looking at who your audience is when they're online and when they engage with your content can be some of the most powerful metrics to then come back and say, okay, how can I develop a strategy that really aligns with this, and not focus so much on just, the likes or even, comments. There's so many other metrics like saves and shares that really speak to how your audience is responding. So, using all of that in combination, you can really develop a powerful strategy off of that.
Yeah, you can even sort it so that you can see your post within a given time period and what actions people have taken. So, yeah, it's great to see what posts got the most likes, but what posts got people to click your link in bio? What posts got people to visit your profile after they saw it on the feed? It's very
and even stories, stories, which stories got people to respond? If you elicit a DM or a response from it, and people are like, oh my gosh, I love that show that you talked about, or oh, this is my favorite, interior designer. Thank you so much for sharing. Like, those are the kinds of engagements that you want. So it's not just these vanity metrics, but also like real, true engagement, and you can find that all in those analytics.
Absolutely. It's so important to know what what actions you're trying to drive and to see which ones are driving them. And then
Yeah.
once you're able to see that, what are some things you can look for in those pieces of content? Like, yes, you can have it show you which pieces of content are driving those actions, but then what pieces of information should you try to draw out of the commonalities of those pieces that are doing well?
Yeah, so I think it's a couple of things. I mean, obviously, there are a lot of factors that influence how and when somebody engages with your content. So, it could be the time of day or the day that you posted. It could be the content of the post. So, does this picture feature, a person or an object? Is it a lighter picture? Is it a darker picture? What colors are present in it, even if you're really trying to figure out what maybe your brand aesthetic looks like. There's with images or with video rather, you can look at, is this a longer video? Is it a shorter one? Did it have subtitles? Did it not? So you have to look at, a broad spectrum of things, but then narrow down and try and test a few. So if you're looking at content, because that's probably the most obvious one, right? If you're looking at just how images perform, compare the two images, one that did really, really well and one that maybe you thought would do well and didn't, and look at the differences and think about, if I'm my audience, how do I perceive these two things? Do I really relate because you showed me, kind of a behind the scenes look at your life, and that was really something that drew me in, versus, this information graphic that maybe doesn't quite relate to me. So you can look at the types of content. Also, time of day, like I mentioned, your captions, if you are writing a caption that ends with a call to action, which I would highly recommend everyone do, you're going to get engagement more than if you just give a life update or, some sort of more vague caption, right? Because you're inviting a conversation.
And that call to action doesn't have to be a sales call to action.
No,
It doesn't have to
absolutely.
be buy my thing. It can be asking a question. As you
Yeah.
pointed out, starting a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, with captions, just briefly talking about that, like you said, it doesn't always have to be sales, or it doesn't always even have to be directly related to your business. It could be a personal post that you're sharing that you're really trying to kind of open the lid on your business and show people who you are so that they can relate to you and relate to your team. So it could be a question as silly as, do you like, tacos or pizza better? And just invite a conversation, because it doesn't always have to be about your business or your service or whatever you're trying to, the end goal for why you have a business. It can just be about relating to your audience and really connecting. So, inviting those questions. And then also, if somebody responds and comments, don't just respond to their comment with thank you or that's great or some, one-liner. Ask a question back if it makes sense, because then you're inviting more conversation, more engagement. And then Instagram sees that and goes, oh, wow, this is a really interesting post. We should show this to more people.
Yeah, and that's a good point also, because you mentioned before seeing what time of day you're getting engagement.
Mm-hmm.
Instagram isn't quite as algorithmically driven as Facebook is in that regard. Facebook, I'm going to see a post today from Tuesday, because the algorithm is still kind of snowballing that post and its reach. Instagram is a little closer to chronological, but it sounds like it will still take that reach and that engagement into account, just maybe not over as long a period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and especially when you think about, posts and stories. I mean, even for everyone that's listening, think about your own, your own way that you interact with Instagram. So if you're anything like me, you may scroll through a couple of posts that are kind of top of feed, and then you're going to go watch a whole bunch of stories and probably click through them pretty quick, but you're going to watch a lot. You're going to consume a lot of stories. So when you think about when your audience is online, you also can think about what types of content they'll likely engage with in that moment. And then also what really can live on your feed versus stories. So, stories are going to be consumed within the 24-hour period that they're live. And you can really reach people when they're online and they're active. Your post is going to live there, unless you save your stories to highlights, it's going away after 24 hours, but your post is going to live on your grid as basically a portfolio or a gallery or even a storefront, if you want to think about it that way, for your business. So, really thinking about what action you want people to take, whether it's something more timely and it could be more stories driven, or it's something a little more timeless and more evergreen. It can live a little more on your post. And that's not to say you can't use posts to drive immediate action. You absolutely can, because people are still seeing them in relatively real time, like you were saying. But I think you can sort of shift your mindset too around what's the outcome I want from this, and then where does that content belong?
That brings us to a really good point, which is that there are kind of 4 different types of content that you can put on Instagram, right? I don't mean like videos versus pictures. I mean, there's feed posts,
Yep.
which appear on the news feed, and they appear on your grid. They live there forever unless
Yep.
you choose to delete them. There's stories. So those are the 2 biggest ones, feed
Yep.
posts and stories. Then there's IGTV and there's live. So I
Yep.
really want to actually drill down a little bit on feed posts and on stories, and what types of content tend to work well in each of those spaces, because they're not the same and they're not consumed in the same way.
Yeah. So I think, you hear people kind of toss around this idea that, oh, posts are dead, you don't see them anymore. And that's just not the case. Your grid is really a representation of who you are as a brand at a very, cultivated and kind of curated level, because you do want to present yourself, well in that grid. So think about your grid as the first impression people have of your business or your store or your services, whatever the case may be, right? Because think about how many times you go looking for something on Instagram. You're like, I need a cute new swimsuit for this vacation, or, I need somebody who can help me get my workout routine together, right? So you go looking for somebody and you're going to quickly scroll through their grid to see whether or not you relate to the content that they're putting out, their general kind of personality or aesthetic. So that grid represents your business as a portfolio or as a first impression.
A couple
And people
months
can
ago, Janet Murray mentioned that it's sort of the magazine cover of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a way that people can really quickly, I mean, you think about people's attention span is not very long. So you have a couple of seconds to really capture people with your first couple of grid posts. So we, often talk about, and you'll hear people talk about, make sure that you're showing your face somewhere in there, and make sure that it's really clear what your business does and what you stand for if you have a cause behind your business. Or what service you offer. What can I get from being a part of your community or engaging with your account? So the post is really geared toward that, that portfolio or that, first impression. Your stories, are really a good way to be a little more personal, to kind of let the guard down a little bit. Granted, you still want there to be a thread of your brand throughout everything that you put out on social media, so that you're not just throwing random stuff up on stories. But it can be a really good way for you to, introduce yourself more to your audience, give behind the scene looks. Maybe your business is really messy behind the scenes. I think everyone can attest that that's true for them.
No.
But
Look around.
we're perfectly put together all the time. Absolutely. But yeah, it's a good way for you to show a behind the scenes look and be really relatable to people. Show up, talk to camera, talk to your audience. It also can be a really good place to drive outcomes. So whereas your posts are going to be a little more, the content rather is going to be a little more geared toward your sort of pillars of your business or things that you want to focus on or promote, and the captions may be geared toward an outcome. Stories, really, you can think about, like, what is the purpose of going on stories today? Is it to, invite people to download a new printable that I came out with, or is it to get people to sign up to my email list, or is it just a hey guys, I wanted to show up today and talk to you at an engagement and kind of trust building type story. So it's a little more outcome focused, but a little less polished, I guess would be a good way to put it. It's a little more friendly and relatable.
I like that. Now, to the point of being more polished maybe on the feed.
Yeah.
There's different levels of polish that people
Absolutely.
do. And this is highly subjective, but I would love to hear your opinion. So some people, it's so polished. Like they have a 9 square image where every single post, really is just part of it. They're nonsense posts on their own, but then when you look at the grid, they form this beautiful image. And things are so planned to that degree, they will not post in a quantity of less than 3, fewer than 3, because it'll mess up that whole perfect grid. Then there's some people who do kind of an every other post situation where, they'll alternate a graphic text lockup with an actual photograph. Then there's some people where it's a little more of a mixed bag, but there's at least a common color scheme or a common, thread to the type of content that they post. How do you feel about sort of that spectrum in terms of how you personally like to use Instagram? I mean, this is not, I'm not asking what the official status, the official line of Plann is. Just Lauren as a human. How do you feel about that?
I mean, for me, as much as I love a beautiful, very thoughtful grid, just because it's kind of a nice, like, oh, okay, that's like a visual vacation, like you get to kind of enjoy it aesthetically, and it's, an enjoyable experience. When unless I'm actually on somebody's grid, which happens, but I'm really learning about people through the feed. Those nonsense posts that are, one of 3 or one of 9 really can quickly turn me off to a brand, because I'm like, what are you even trying to tell me, or what are you trying to show me? And I don't engage with that, corner of a shoe, because it's part of a bigger, you know what I mean? You see these kind of out of context posts, and that doesn't necessarily draw me in. So when I think about, the grids that I really enjoy, or the ones that I think are doing a really good job, they typically just have a common theme. Now, some of them really get specific and have, like a graphic, a picture, a graphic, and they make this really cool pattern. Those can be really fun if you're intentional about how you produce that content. But I think at the end of the day, the grids and the posts that I really appreciate and engage with most are ones that feel like they have a purpose, and that they were created with me and the audience in mind. So I think that's where, when I talk to people about Instagram, I'm like, don't lose the point of Instagram for the sake of having a perfect grid. Like, the goal of Instagram is still to show up, engage with your audience, promote your business, build your brand. But, don't get so locked in on, oh my gosh, it has to be perfect, that you lose sight of why you're doing it in the first place. So having kind of a common thread, maybe using the same filter on all of your pictures so that they all have sort of the same color tint, or, same colors in mind, producing content that has kind of a similar look and feel. I think it's important, because it shows that you put thought into your brand and how you are perceived by your audience. But I think it's just so important not to lose sight of why you're doing it in the first place, for the sake of having this, quote unquote perfect grid.
I really like that. And I just want to point out to people that you can ask any questions that you'd like in our last few minutes here with Lauren. In the meantime, you already did get kind of into some of this, but I was wondering if someone is just starting to say, you know what, I want to get a little more deliberate about my Instagram feed. I've been kind of scrappy, but I'd like to sort of pull it together and make it a little more professional. What are some easy places to start with that?
Yeah, so I think let's just start by dispelling some myths around being good at Instagram. So first of all, you don't have to be a professional content creator. There are tons of options out there for you to use, stock imagery and stock video. And people are like, oh gosh, stock images. And you get these cheesy pictures that pop in your head. But there are some really beautiful, professionally created stock images that you can really make work with your existing content. So don't feel like you're hamstrung because you can't get out and shoot something or, film this perfect tutorial or whatever right now. There are lots of options for creating content. Even things like, Canva can help you if you're not necessarily a designer or you're like, I have no artistic eye whatsoever. It's okay. They have templates. You can just change the colors to match your brand, and now all of a sudden you look professional. So, it's not something that you have to feel held back by, can I produce enough content to put out on social media? Because I think that's always sort of a big stumbling block for people. The other one is people say, I don't have anything to talk about. Like, who wants to hear that, right? But at the end of the day, every person and every business has a story to tell and a purpose for being around and being on social media. So I think when you start to develop your Instagram purpose or your Instagram strategy, you have to think about sort of the pillars of your brand and the content buckets that you want to fill. So, for example, I'll just use a really easy starting point, right? So if you think about the days of the week, and I'm not saying you have to post every day, but we're going to use this as a model. So let's say you want to start with Motivation Monday, Tip Tuesday. Yeah, absolutely. And so you think about the days of the week, why I do this Wednesday, whatever your days of the week are, right? Those really translate to bigger pillars of your business. So Motivation Monday is an inspirational post. We've seen those do really well especially these days, because people need kind of a positive spin on things or something to make them laugh or inspire them. Tip Tuesday, that's educational, right? So you're teaching your audience something. You're showing up as an expert on some topic. And if you think you aren't an expert on something, or you think you don't have something to bring to the table, I promise you do, because not everyone knows everything. So you have something that you can share, and you have a unique perspective that you can bring to a conversation. So, Tip Tuesday is going to be that educational post. Why I, am this business owner, or why I do what I do. Wednesday could be a behind the scenes kind of peek. It could be a little more personal, a little more relational. It could be sort of the picture of you showing up on the feed just to let people know who's behind the business. It could be a peek into your favorite recipe, your daily routine, whatever the case may be, and talk about your why. That is a content pillar on its own. Why does your business exist? So thinking about the pillars of your business or the pillars of your story, and then developing content around those, is a really easy way to start being consistent. And then you can look at your analytics, like we were talking about earlier, and see, okay, well, maybe Throwback Thursday doesn't work anymore, right? So people aren't engaging, but they're really, really interested, and they're saving and sharing my Tip Tuesdays because those graphics I'm putting out, I guess, are really, relatable and educational. So you can start to weave that into more of your strategy and go from maybe 7 content pillars down to 5, or you may realize that what you thought you were sharing for, Tip Tuesday again, some of it was educational, but some of it was maybe had a different tilt to it, or maybe had a different purpose, and you kind of had lumped them together, but you realized that they work pretty well regardless. So you could split those out and actually think about how you could really continue to build on the things that are performing well. So starting with just looking at your days of the week could be a really good starting point. And then see what works and double down on that so that you can become really consistent and you're producing content that your audience is engaging with.
I love that. Thank you so much for that, Lauren.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about how tools can help. And this is just the last couple minutes, but of course you work with a tool, Plann.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what tools can do to help us out with all of this and to make it a little easier to put together that beautifully planned Instagram, that strategic Instagram feed without it feeling too sterile.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, your tools can help you have a framework, and there's still flexibility. You still are in control of your social media. So don't feel like if you decide to jump into some tools, now you're serious and this is it's a structured, sterile kind of thing that you have to deal with. It's just it's a tool. It's a way to help you take it to the next level. So obviously Plann I'm very passionate about, but being able to plan ahead so that you don't have to be sitting there at 5 o'clock going, what am I going to post? I don't know. I can't even think about a caption right now. The ability to plan ahead, to batch your content, to upload lots of media, or to create some stuff ahead of time that you can pull from. So Plann has media collections where you can store content and then just pull it onto your grid when you're ready to post. The strategy tool that we have is my absolute favorite because it actually lets you set up those content pillars that I was talking about.
Oh, that's cool.
As placeholders ahead of time so you can pull stuff in. So really thinking about, how to be intentional on social media, get some sort of, planning tool in place, even if you have to start with some sort of, just list and then transition to something like Plann. I mentioned it earlier, but Canva is an awesome tool for designing.
I love Canva.
Absolutely. It's the most accessible, I think, kind of graphic design, content creation type tool. They have built-in stock imagery and video. They have templates. They have templates for every different kind of poster design you would want to do. They also integrate with Plann, which has been really fun for us to be able to bring to our customers. So when you're inside Plann and you're thinking about what you want to post next, you actually can create something and then pop it onto your grid, all without ever having to open 10 different tabs, to figure out what you're doing. Some other things that we didn't really touch on but could be helpful, thinking about your bio. You have a set amount of real estate to, engage with people or to let them know who you are and link them wherever you want them to go. So there's some really great linking tools. Linktree is my personal favorite.
Yep, I used that.
Yeah, they have the ability to actually schedule links too. So if you're putting out blogs or you're putting out kind of more timely content, you can schedule your links ahead of time to go live, and you can use them across all different social media platforms, not just Instagram. So if you have a Facebook or a TikTok or a whatever, you can use that Linktree link everywhere, and it can be a really good way to consistently make sure that you're driving people to the same places, and you can get analytics around how that's performing. But yeah, I think, the planning and the media stuff, I think, are the two biggest hurdles for people. And, obviously I'm partial to Plann, but I think really, find the tool that works for you and don't feel pressured to lock in something that's really structured, but just start somewhere. Give yourself some grace if it doesn't work right away. Drill down in your analytics, and then you can develop a strategy that works really well for you.
I love that. Thank you so much, Lauren, for being here today and for sharing your awesome Instagram knowledge. Next week continues Instagram month, of course. It is still July. So next week we're going to have Jen Herman of Jen's Trends. She literally wrote the book on Instagram twice. 2 for Dummies books, Instagram for Business for Dummies, and the more recently released, oddly enough, Instagram for Dummies. She's got a 3rd book coming out soon, too, with some other friends of ours that we'll talk about. But she's going to be talking about succeeding with organic Instagram, how to get those organic posts going that get reach, that get engagement, and that really drive your goals. Again, I'm Christine Gritmon. I do this every week. Hope to see you next week. Bye.